Hello, this is Erica, and I'll be reading to you Chapter 43, The President in Dallas. President Kennedy had to deal with a Congress controlled by an alliance of Northern Republicans and Southern Democrats. They voted as a bloc against change. Kennedy, a liberal Democrat, wanted to take the country in new directions. The conservative Congress stood in his way. The president spoke to the American people of a new frontier that would go beyond FDR's New Deal. Kennedy had legislation that he wanted passed: civil rights bills, tax cut bills, and health care bills. There were also bills on equal pay for women, aid to the cities, aid to poor rural areas, manpower training, and a minimum wage. At first, the president was frustrated. Some people called his ideas socialist. Fear of change, especially in the field of civil rights, caused his popularity to drop. But by 1963, the president saw signs that his ideas were being heard. John F. Kennedy seemed to know how to inspire people. Remember that charisma? It was working. The president believed he could get enough votes in Congress to pass his bills, and Kennedy believed that the next election might bring him a Congress with even bigger favorable numbers. He expected to win a second term in the presidential elections in 1964. He hoped Congress would support his new frontier. Except for that situation in Vietnam, things were looking good. But there was trouble in Texas, political trouble, and Texas votes would be important in the coming election. The Texas Democratic leaders couldn't seem to get along with each other. So when Vice President Lyndon B. Johnson, a Texan, asked Kennedy to go on a peacemaking mission, the president felt it was his job to go. Kennedy's press secretary got a letter. "Don't let the president come to Dallas," it said. "Texas is too dangerous." The letter writer added. The secretary put the letter aside. Everyone knew there was a group of noisy hate-mongers in Dallas, but this president didn't seem to worry. And so, on a day filled with sunshine, he and Jackie waved goodbye to their 2 children and flew off to the Lone Star State. Things started wonderfully well. The crowds in San Antonio and Houston and Fort Worth were unusually warm and encouraging. At Fort Worth, unexpectedly, Kennedy went out into a parking lot and shook as many hands as he could. It bothered the Secret Service men who were there to protect him, but the president liked contact with people. Later in the day, when Air Force One, the presidential plane, touched down at Love Field in Dallas, thousands of people were waiting to cheer the president, and the First Lady, Jacqueline Kennedy, was handed a big bouquet of roses and asters. The weather was so fine and the crowd so enthusiastic that the plastic bubble top was taken off the presidential limousine. The bulletproof side windows were rolled down. Texas Governor John Connally and his wife sat in the front seat of the big car. The Kennedys sat behind. They were on their way to a luncheon, and they took the busiest route through the city so they could see the most people. Crowds lined the streets. A few among them were protesting, but most were cheering. When the car passed an old 7-story schoolbook warehouse, Mrs. Connolly turned around and said to the president, "You can't say that Dallas isn't friendly to you today." Oh. 1 second. Sorry about that. I apologize for the wait. A little computer trouble. Okay. But reading to what we were reading. But President Kennedy never answered. 2 bullets had pierced his head. For the rest of their lives, most Americans would remember exactly where they were on November 22nd, 1963, when they heard the news. Again and again, they would stare at their TV screens and see the motorcade, the president falling into his wife's lap, the press at Parkland Hospital, and Jacqueline in her blood-stained suit. At 1 p.m., John F. Kennedy was pronounced dead. At 2:30 p.m., Lyndon B. Johnson was sworn in as chief executive on Air Force One. The plane carried him and the martyred president back to the nation's capital, and the world wept. Here's a little excerpt down here Ruby's revenge. Dallas police captured Lee Harvey Oswald in a movie theater after he shot a policeman who noticed his suspicious behavior. Oswald, who had lived in Russia and Cuba, was charged with the shooting of President Kennedy. And Governor Connally, who was wounded. 2 days later, going through a jail passageway, Oswald was shot and killed by Jack Ruby, a Dallas nightclub owner. The debate about whether others were involved in JFK's assassination continues to this day. So here, millions were watching on TV. Jack Ruby shot Lee Harvey Oswald on his way back to the county jail. And that concludes chapter 43.